You remember the cartoon characters, Lucy and Linus? Everybody remember Lucy and Linus, the cartoon characters? Lucy and Linus are sitting on the living room floor one morning watching television. Lucy says to Linus, "Go get me a glass of water." Linus is kind of surprised by all of this. "Why should I do anything for you? You never do anything for me." So Lucy says, "On your 75th birthday, I will bake you a cake." Linus gets up then, sort of shaking his head, and goes to the kitchen and says, "Life is more pleasant when you have something to look forward to." Tells the truth, of course. Life is more pleasant when you have something to look forward to, like Sunday dinner or Christmas or opening day at Wrigley Field. Life is much better when you have something to look forward to. This whole thing about anticipation. You just have been served that wonderful plate of hot, fresh French fries, and you've got that ketchup bottle turned upside down, and you're watching the ketchup slowly work its way down the edge of the glass toward the lip of the jar, and pretty soon it's going to drip onto your French fries. And you get in a hurry, so you pound on the bottom of the thing, and it doesn't make it go any faster, but it makes you feel better. Sooner, eventually, after a long wait, the ketchup comes down on the French fries, and you have this wonderful, wonderful snack to enjoy. The restaurants that have those little plastic squeeze bottles kind of spoil the whole anticipation, takes all the fun out of it. Anticipation, anticipation. The dictionary defines it as a good thing. Maybe we're taking steps in anticipation so that we are ready for what we expect will happen. And maybe it's a good thing. The birth of a baby, the vacation trip, some kind of thing that we're looking forward to eagerly, and so you're getting ready to go to Florida in a couple of months, or a couple of weeks, and you've packed away all of your winter or summer clothes, but you don't need them up here, but you're anticipating the trip to Florida, so you get out the swimsuit again, and the shorts, and the flip-flops, and so on, because you're anticipating something quite different from what is in front of you right now. Or maybe you're anticipating certain situations that you would rather avoid, like a stroke or whatever. So you're starting to anticipate by taking steps to make sure it doesn't happen, like taking your blood pressure medicine or whatever else you need to do in order to prevent some terrible thing from happening, or at least reduce the chances. Anticipation. Sometimes anticipation is a good and warm and exciting thing. Sometimes anticipation is more like dread or anxiety or fear. A little bit of both is mixed up in today's gospel reading. We've reached the midpoint now of the Advent season, and the very definition of Advent is anticipating, this waiting eagerly, waiting hopefully, or waiting perhaps with a certain amount of anxiety for what is about to happen. You anticipate when you keep Advent to lean toward the future, or maybe you're leaning away from the future. Depending on what it is you're anticipating, you're leaning one way or the other as you await whatever it is that's going to happen. And in today's gospel, anticipation is in the air. And people are leaning every which way. Some people are leaning toward what is coming. Some people are leaning away from whatever is coming. What's coming? What does John have everybody all in a tizzy about? John the Baptizer we're talking about here. John the Baptizer, who is described in the text as a man sent from God, who came as a witness to testify to the light. John the Baptizer. The religious leaders are really uneasy about this guy. They just don't know anything about him. Religious leaders get really uneasy if they don't know where you went to seminary, if they don't know who your teachers are, if they don't know what tradition you represent. The religious leaders get really uneasy. And besides that, John has never been ordained, and the Committee on Ministry has never interviewed him. He's kind of like a wild card. They just don't know what to expect, and so they are nervous. The religious leaders. The people, however, have been listening to John. They've been listening to John eagerly, and many of them have received the baptism that John offered, and some of them have even become John's disciples. And so maybe this is all starting to get out of hand. And so the people who are in charge of such things figure they'd better sit down with John and find out what's going on. So they corner John somewhere, and they say, "John, who are you? Who are you? Are you the Messiah? Are you Elijah? Are you the prophet?" Now that's an important sequence in their line of thinking. Everybody then was anticipating the coming of Messiah. They didn't know who Messiah was for sure. They didn't know how Messiah would come or when. But they were anticipating this wonderfully powerful messianic figure who would come and set everything right, who would break the power of Rome, who would restore the nation of Israel to its proper freedom and bring back the good days, the days when David was the king. So everybody was anticipating the Messiah. And many of them believed that the prophet Elijah would come back to begin his ministry over again to prepare the way. And if Elijah didn't make it back, maybe in preparation for Elijah's coming would be another prophet. And so there was this whole chain of anticipation that was a part of the religious tradition of the time. And they walked their way backwards through that chain. Are you the big guy, the Messiah? Are you maybe Elijah? Are you a prophet? Pretty much guessed that they knew the answer to all of those questions. They pretty much guessed that John was none of the above. And John affirmed it. John said, no, I'm not. I'm not the Messiah. I'm not Elijah. I'm not the prophet. So who then are you, John? We know who you aren't, and that's half the answer, but that's not a good enough answer. We need to know who you are. And so John says, I will tell you, I am a voice. I am the voice of one crying out in the wilderness, make straight the way of the Lord. I am that voice. I am the witness. I point out to you what you need to see. My work is to anticipate, and my work is to help you anticipate by pointing you in the right direction so that you know what you are looking for, so that you're able to begin to see what is right there. In fact, John said, I am pointing to one who already stands among you, although you don't know who he is. In the sequence of John's gospel, John has already baptized Jesus, so Jesus is already lurking there in the shadows, waiting for his ministry to begin. So John could point to the one. He knows who the one is. But the people don't know who he is yet. And so this brings out another set of questions. Who is this coming one? Who is this hidden one? Because it is a hidden one at this point. A hidden one who is already among us. Hidden perhaps in plain sight. Hidden in plain sight. So now we are a little curious ourselves, and we begin to anticipate. We begin looking, and we begin listening, and we begin struggling to see, and we begin struggling to hear. And the hidden one will claim for himself these words we heard from Isaiah already. The hidden one will claim for himself those words to describe his mission and his calling. When the hidden one preached in the hometown synagogue of Nazareth, he read the words that we have already heard. He read from Isaiah, the Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he anointed me to bring good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim release to the captives and recover of sight to the blind, to let the oppressed go free, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor. Jesus read those words at the hometown synagogue in Nazareth, and then he explained to the people how he is the one who will fulfill those words. And to the hometown folk, it sounded a little bit arrogant, a little bit overblown. They said to Jesus, those are pretty nice words, but we remember when you were a snot-nosed kid, so it's hard for us to take you seriously. That's one time when Jesus picked up those words and claimed them for himself. A little bit later on, John the Baptizer is now in prison. He'd antagonized King Herod. He'd sort of run amok by trying to point out some of the moral faults that the king had. And the king didn't like this scrawny little prophet pointing out his moral faults. And so to shut him up, he just put him in prison. And he's been sitting in prison for a while now. And when you sit in prison, you begin to doubt your vision. You begin to doubt your purpose. And so he sent some of his disciples to talk to Jesus. He said to the disciples, you asked Jesus this question, are you really the one? Are you really the one who is coming? Or should we be waiting for somebody else? Sitting in prison for who knows how long and not knowing what will happen to you can be a little rough on anticipation. So John posed the question and Jesus responded. You remember how he responded? Jesus said to the disciples, you go back and you tell John what you have seen and what you have heard. The blind receive their sight, the lame walk, the lepers are cleansed, the deaf hear, the dead are raised, the poor have good news preached to them. Do you hear the echo of Isaiah? So how will we recognize the hidden one? How will we see him, and where will we see him? How will we anticipate his coming? Is the hidden one among us in the same way as he was to those that John was speaking to? You know that those who questioned John could look the hidden one right straight in the eye if they could find him. In fact, perhaps some of them already had looked the hidden one right in the eye and never realized who he was. You know that many, many people who lived then and there never figured out who he was, despite his teaching, despite his miracles, despite his preaching. But we have heard from the one who prepares the way. And because we have heard from the one who prepares the way, maybe we will be able to see what is hidden now in plain view. When we speak words that unleash freedom and justice, maybe we glimpse the hidden one. When we reach out a hand to help someone who is hurting, maybe we will glimpse the hidden one. When we offer to comfort to someone who is mourning, maybe we will see the hidden one. When we offer praise instead of find fault, maybe we will see the hidden one. When we build up and repair what has been broken down, maybe we will see the hidden one. And joy will break forth, and salvation will break forth, and righteousness will break forth. And what we anticipate this Advent will come true. This little snippet of a story kind of pulls it all together. E. Stanley Jones was a missionary, a Methodist missionary to India, had a very, very long ministry, started in the early 1900s, and his ministry went well into the middle of the 1900s. A teacher, a preacher, a scholar, a physician, powerful in his ministry to both in India and also in this country as he raised up the whole notion of what it means to be a missionary and how to share the gospel in ways that are friendly and gracious and careful of all of the different cultural questions that are going on between India and our culture in those days. E. Stanley Jones said this: "The early Christians did not say in dismay, look what the world is coming to. Look what the world is coming to. Instead, he said, with delight, the early Christians said, look at what has come into the world. Look at what has come into the world." Let us pray. O hidden one, with delight we anticipate your coming.